1974. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. It's time for another year. It's time for 1974. What's going on in 74? Well, not a whole lot. You just have the only presidential resignation we've ever had. Richard Nixon is forced to resign due to the Watergate scandal. Vice President Gerald Ford becomes President Ford, and later in that same year gives Nixon a full pardon for any indiscretions he may have committed while president. Also, you have Patty Hearst, the Patty Hearst kidnapping. It's a really interesting, exciting saga. The world population reaches 4 billion in 1974. The Godfather Part 2 wins Best Picture, making it the only, the original film and its sequel, the only time both of those films for any series, won Best Picture. Rumble in the Jungle, Ali versus Frazier. A big fight occurs. And finally, Stranger Things and I guess geeks worldwide, including myself, rejoice. Dungeons and Dragons is released as a role playing game. But you're here for the music. So let's get into it. Let's start with some honorable mentions, as we usually do, and then we'll get into my top 10 for the year. All right, so honorable mentions. It is the 70s, so like clockwork, Steely Dan will release an awesome record. This time it's Pretzel Logic. You have Shuggy Otis releasing Inspiration Information. I always have to read the title, I always forget that. Now, Shuggy Otis was an interesting dude, or I think he's still around, is an interesting dude. He was this sort of prodigiously talented young guy. Um, Put out a couple of records. This one really considered a kind of his masterpiece. And there's a good picture of him there. And then he just kind of disappeared for a long time, and has since kind of reemerged here and there. King Crimson puts out Starless and Bible Black. It's a really interesting, kind of bold record. You have some really tight studio tracks, and then you also have some way out there improvisational tracks, which are just awesome. My favorite story related to this record is Trio, which features David Cross, Robert Fripp, and John Wetton. Bill Bruford sits out. He was there, but he decided that the song was actually best, kind of worked best without him contributing. So he just kind of sat there silently and didn't contribute. And Robert Fripp was so impressed with what he quoted, or quote, admirable restraint. And for that, he actually gave Bruford a writing credit on Trio, but for the decision of actually not playing anything at all, which is interesting. Sometimes that's the best call. Randy Newman puts out Good Old Boys, an incredible concept record. I love Randy Newman. And I mean, this is an amazing record. It's a hard hitting record, sort of kind of taking these hard look at the South and the prejudices and all of that. Newman also often kind of, takes on these roles that if you don't know what he's doing, some people just take it at face value and think he's racist or whatever, but he's actually commenting on that, by playing these roles. But this album also actually has some really kind of tender, very touching songs too. Louisiana 1927 is probably my favorite. Kind of embarrassed to say that I do kind of like the Eagles, but I do kind of like the Eagles. On the Border is actually a really good record. Already Gone, it's a hell of an opener. So good. Midnight Flyer is cool. What else? It's really good on here. Anyway, On the Border is a good song too. It's a great song, sort of pre Hotel California, right? All right. Neil Young puts out On the Beach, the middle record in his Ditch trilogy. You have, I think, one of the most interesting, complex, progressive albums that I know of. Relayer from Yes, one of these great Roger Dean album covers here too, album art. That side one there's one song on the whole first side, "The Gates of Delirium." I think are really intense and just have some fascinating passages. Kind of like with the Eagles, another band that I don't know. No, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed that I love Kiss. I do love Kiss. And so you have here "Hotter Than Hell," their sophomore effort, Kiss. Van Morrison puts out "Beaten Fleece," which is the last record in that kind of original, that amazing streak of records he had, kind of from the beginning in the late '60s to here in '74. He's actually going to take a couple years off after this. Then he'll return, but in kind of a different form. But brilliant stuff here. A very different sounding record, but a lot of fun. You have Lou Reed's "Rock and Roll Animal," sort of a live album of Lou at his sort of glammy best, right? Rolling Stones put out a record. It's Only Rock and Roll. And yeah, I like it. Okay. And then finally, I think this was a good one. 461 Ocean Boulevard from Eric Clapton, where he starts to kind of get into his sort of more, I don't know, mellow phase, I guess, but still some really good songs on here. I like his version of "I Shot the Sheriff." "Mainline Florida" is pretty cool. Yeah, some good stuff on here. Good stuff. Two more honorable mentions, but I have them on CD here. One I just downloaded. One I just got on iTunes way back and put on disc, but uh, editor can put the picture up here. But it's Brian Eno's "Here Come the Warm Jets," Brian Eno's first real proper solo album. And then finally, Joni Mitchell, "Court and Spark." Okay, let's get into the top 10. My top 10 for 1974. Number 10, a scandalous album cover. This band likes to have scandalous album covers, so have to have some censorship here. But Roxy Music's "Country Life." Here, let's look at the backside here. The fourth album from Roxy Music, as it says here, the fourth Roxy Music album. And I think where they really hit their stride post Brian Eno, after losing Eno. We kind of talked about when I was talking about "For Your Pleasure" in the '73 video. Or was it '72? Yeah, whatever it was. Um, there's that struggle between Eno and Brian Ferry. Eno's gone. Brian Ferry is able to sort of take Roxy Music, maybe into a more mainstream direction, but they still kind of maintain some experimental, you know, elements there. Casanova's great. Bittersweet. Thrill of It All is a great opener. All I Want Is You. I love Out of the Blue. Out of the Blue may be my favorite song on here. But there you go. All right, number 9 from Mr. David Bowie. We have "Diamond Dogs." Disturbing, odd album art there. "Diamond Dogs." The story behind this one was Bowie wanted to do a concept album based on George Orwell's 1984, but then he couldn't get the rights from Orwell's estate, I believe. And so it sort of became this sort of more vague dystopian kind of thing. Although, you have the song 1984, you have Big Brother, so still have some elements from that original idea. But man, this is great stuff on here. "Sweet Thing," I think, is really underrated. "Rebel Rebel," of course, it's a song most people know off of here. Great guitar riff from Bowie himself, actually, um, on that one. Yeah, because Bowie actually pretty much plays the guitars on here. Mick Ronson's gone by this time. Yeah, this one kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. So the very end of that, I guess it's sort of what's seen as sort of glammy period. But right before it gets into the Station to Station and Berlin Trilogy and all that. I think this is fantastic. Okay, number 8, one of the great singer songwriters of the '70s, Jackson Browne. There he is. Looks like a singer songwriter, right? Jackson. He looks so sensitive. Jackson Browne with "Late for the Sky." Superlative songwriting. Um, Great song, "Late for the Sky." "Fountain of Sorrow" might be his best written song, I think. "For a Dancer," "Before the Deluge." Excuse me. Some great, just like I said, singer songwriter stuff on here. All right, number 7. Got something a little more experimental from Kraftwerk, "Autobahn." I love Kraftwerk. Um, you know, out of Germany, obviously. Great experimental, just really groundbreaking stuff. The krautrock, right? So the subgenre. Um, but yeah, Kraftwerk is just fantastic, and this record for me, and some of their previous records are good, but this record kind of starts this period of kind of a streak of really innovative, great records. Of course, that title track so influential on people like Bowie, on Brian Eno, and a lot of other people. Okay, number 6, we've got Radio City from Big Star. By this point, they are down to a trio. Chris Bell has left, although Chris Bell is still on some of these tracks, just uncredited. But it's really Alex Chilton's show here. But like their debut, this is also a classic in power pop. And like their debut, hardly anyone heard it when it came out. But since then, it has become incredibly influential and just killer power pop. I mean, what a great band. Okay, number 5, somewhat related to the krautrock of Kraftwerk, we have Tangerine Dream with Phaedra. Very innovative, incredibly innovative stuff with synthesizers and sequencers. That title track, which is that kind of hypnotic, mesmerizing, kind of repeated, theme, which is these alterations as you go. Just incredible stuff. Tangerine Dream would sort of mine that same type of thing for many records afterwards, but yeah, this is the one that really um, a lot of people noticed them, right, with this with Phaedra. Very interesting experimental stuff. Number 4 is, in my view, one of the great live albums ever. And this is a guy who already had a record in the honorable mention. It was a busy year for him. Got Van Morrison's "It's Too Late to Stop Now." Incredible double live album. I just love that back cover photo. It's just so great. Actually, the front cover is great too. He is just totally on this night. Um, I mean, doing covers that it's a rare case where I think he is at least the equal of the original versions of these covers he's doing. And I'm talking about, he's covering Sam Cooke, he's covering Ray Charles. I mean, some huge names, but Van Morrison just digs deep. And a lot of his great original tracks too, original songs. Yeah, just great stuff. And some of these songs, like I'm looking at Cypress Avenue, "Listen to the Lion," where he really stretches out, stretching like to the 10-minute mark, and just digs about as deep as you can into the soul of those songs. Just one of the great live albums. But my top 3 for 1974. Another band at number 3, another band who had an honorable mention in here. I had their sophomore effort in the honorable mentions, but I do have Kiss, their debut, as number 3 for 1974. Yes, I do love Kiss. I just do. I always have. One of my very first bands I ever got into, but yeah, their debut, I love it. I mean, a lot of people complain about the production, the recording. It doesn't bother me. I mean, it's full of songs that just have stayed in their set lists for decades. I mean, Strutter, "Nothing to Lose," "Firehouse," "Cold Gin." It's one of those great compositions from Ace Frehley. What else is great on here? Yeah, 100,000 Years, Black Diamond. Hell, I don't even mind Love Theme from Kiss. Whatever. I think this is fantastic. I mean, love it, love it, love it. All right. But in my number 2 and number 1 slots, I have, I think, 2 of the great progressive rock albums ever made. You've got And I struggled with what's at one and what's at two. Honestly, right up to right before I started filming this, I had them flipped. But then I like at the last minute, it's like, no, I gotta switch them. So I mean, they're so close. But in the number two slot, another band who had a record in the honorable mentions, King King Crimson's Red. Just, I mean, the guitar tones that Robert Fripp has on this record are just brutal. I mean, I always liken it. It's like a jagged knife. It's just slicing through. That's like what his guitar sounds like on here. So good. I mean, with Red, and then one more, Red Nightmare. But then you've got, the epic Starless on there, like all 12 minutes of it, and the really creative improvisation Providence on there. Fallen Angel is gorgeous. It's just This is just it's a perfect record, and hardly anything like it. Really influential too. Even Kurt Cobain talked about how, like, he really really dug this record. I mean, it's so so people you might not even think of. But this was the final record of kind of that phase. King Crimson would break up after this and not regroup really until the '80s or early 1980s in a very different form. Although obviously Fripp, because he's on every King Crimson record, but and Bill Bruford would return as well. But yeah, Red, King Crimson. But my number one, a double album masterpiece, Peter Gabriel's swan song with Genesis before he would leave, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Now, if you ask me what this record's about and the convoluted story here, if you want to read all that in the liner notes, I don't know. But I will tell you, it is just brilliant musically. And Gabriel's voice is always interesting. But this is a record where I think really the rest of the band really shines too. Gabriel was kind of working separately by this point. He was writing a lot of these lyrics, but the rest of the guys came up with a lot of this music kind of separately. And musically, I just think this is brilliant. Um, just the scope. I mean, you know, like I said, double album, one of those rare double albums where I don't think there's any filler. I think it all kind of flows together and works. And even if I don't really follow or get the whole story, it doesn't matter, just because musically, it's just the whole thing flows together and it takes you on this journey. And Peter Gabriel's in top form on here too. I mean, just amazing. So I don't think he could have left on a higher note, than here. Well, all right, guys, that's my 1974. So did I leave anything out? Put it in the comments. You agree, disagree, whatever. It's a place for us to talk music. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. We really appreciate it. We could use the more subscribers we get and all that, the more we can do what we want to do. Um, like the videos, hit the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.